Good morning, folks, and welcome to Shop Talk number 39. Thank you for tuning in as usual. And please make sure that you put in the chat box there where you're from. I really enjoy seeing where everybody's from. After the fact, after the video, I go and watch the replay and I see all of the comments and all the videos. So I certainly appreciate you putting that in there. Thank you again for tuning in, taking time out of your busy day. You're going to have a great show today. And I'm going to have Chris Ensor from Elevate Luthiers here on in just a few minutes. And thank you to Jim Deeming for that wonderful toe tapping intro music there. Certainly appreciate that. And let's see, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from somebody. So all my guests are in the green room there. If you guys would please just mute your mics. There we go. All right. So put in the chat box where you're from. Certainly appreciate that. Tom Jackson from Oregon. Randall from Washington. Pensacola, Florida is here. Let's see, where else? We got a few people in Canada I saw. There's Chris Lewis up there in Canada as well. My God, Flagstaff, Arizona, Ann Arbor, Michigan. TJ says, get your favorite beverage and tune in. That's down there in North Carolina. Thanks for tuning in, TJ. Bruce Jones also up in Calgary. Canada is well represented here today. All right, thanks again for tuning in. I've got a special announcement for you here today. And before I make that special announcement, you guys may notice something on my bench behind me here. I'm going to quickly show you what that is. For those of you that don't know, that is the brand new StewMac side bending machine. And those things are about as rare as Brazilian rosewood. I mean, they're almost on the CITES list of rare and endangered species because they're hard to get. In fact, you can't even get them yet. They have had such an overwhelming response that they have pushed the launch date from April back to May. But I've got one, and let me just show it to you here. And with the power of technology, I'm going to actually do a little zoom in here. I can pull this thing over and check that beast out. I mean, it is literally a beast. This thing weighs a ton. It's very well made, very well designed. Together in collaboration with Charles Fox. Everybody knows Charles Fox. Has fantastic reputation as a builder and as a teacher. They have designed this new side bender. The waist call is adaptable to any waist out there. It comes with a heating blanket and 3 metal slats, onboard electronics, cutaway arm. This is one of the problems I had with my LMI bender, which I used for a number of years, is it did not have a cutaway arm. This one's got a cutaway attachment. You can also swap out all of the forms to match different models. They've got a jumbo, they've got a dread, they've got an OM, they've got a triple O, and you can also make custom forms for it. So I'm really looking forward to putting this to good use. Just got it in the shop here yesterday, put it together, and I'm looking forward to bending some sides with that sucker. So you guys contact LMI, or not LMI, contact StewMac. LMI's out of business. Contact StewMac and get on their mailing list. They have right on their website there, you can get on their mailing list, and they'll tell you when these things are going to be available. Highly recommended. Very good. I also want to take a quick look at the web page and look at the sponsors for Luthiers Academy. There we go. StewMac, obviously, a fantastic supporter of and a sponsor here at the Luthiers Academy. We've got Acoustic Coffee, we've got Total Vice, Elevate Luthiers, who's going to be on here in just a few minutes talking about some products, Glue Boost, Pacific Rim Tone Woods, also Royal Lac. So make sure you check those out because we don't want these folks to go out of business. Let's keep them in business. It makes our life easier as luthiers. All right, here's a quick special announcement that I told you about. We have a brand new course at the Luthiers Academy. Let me just dial that up here. In addition to the recently launched courses, we had a recently launched course on making an electric guitar neck with CNC. That's with luthier Bob Mizak. Also, composite double top with Gernot Wagner. I traveled to Frankfurt last year, filmed that course. If you want to learn how to make the composite double top using Nomex, then that's the way to go. But the brand new course, and here we go, dun, 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 is the Gypsy Jazz Guitar Building course with a fantastic luthier up there in Summerland, Canada. In fact, I'm going to bring him on. This is Michael Whitney of Whitney Guitars. Welcome aboard, Michael.
Hey, Robbie. Thanks for
How you doing this morning?
Pardon me? Sorry?
I said, how you doing this morning up there in Canada? It's kind of early for you, isn't it?
I'm doing great. Yeah, we're about an hour behind, and spring is waking up here, so yeah, things are going well.
Fantastic. Now, I approached Michael. It's been 2 years ago about this course. And Michael stepped up to the plate, filmed all the footage, sent it to me. We did a collaborative effort on the editing process. It's about 26 hours long. I think this is a fantastic course. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about the course, please?
Yeah, definitely. I build up here in Canada and teach guitar building. And part of what started my luthiery journey was a fascination with the gypsy jazz guitar and the gypsy jazz genre as a whole. Kind of holds a special place in my heart. But what I found was that the resources available to build such a guitar were not as readily available as, say, an OM or a dreadnought. So it took a lot of sort of resourcefulness and tapping into the resources that were out there to kind of hone my own skills and put together kind of a concise course with the idea in mind that a new builder could go from kind of raw materials to a finished product without any knowledge gaps along the way.
And what kind of model a guitar are you going to build in this course? I know it's gypsy jazz, but there's several different models of gypsy jazz. Just explain a little bit about the model you're going to build.
Yeah, in this course, I'm building a Grand Bouche, which is a big mouth gypsy guitar, which was typically more of a rhythm guitar. The oval hole or petite bouche had a smaller sound hole and projected well, was brighter, crisper, and that was, the guitar that was kind of synonymous with Django Reinhardt. So it projected quite well over the ambient noise in the old dance halls. So what I've done with the Grand Bouche is lengthened the scale length to 670 millimeters, changed it to a 14 fret connection. So it's really a guitar that can handle sort of both approaches, both rhythm and lead playing. So the end result is a very well-rounded instrument, suitable to both rhythm and lead players.
Perfect. And in the course, you do it all, right? You do laminated sides, laminated back. Complete from a box of lumber to finished product, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to stay as true to form as possible. Traditionally, the Selmer McAferry company, they built these guitars to be very strong and rigid and could sort of handle the abuse from gigging in these old dance halls in Europe. So the laminated sides really lends itself to that structure and that strength, and also lends itself to just the tonality of the instrument as a whole. So there's a few changes that I made in terms of, let's say, a scarf joint or structural changes where it made sense or where I thought things could be potentially improved upon. But it really draws from tradition as much as possible.
Perfect. And if you go over to the Luthiery Academy website, click on the Gypsy Jazz Guitar Building course. There's a picture of the guitar that Michael builds in the course. Also, there's an intro video and a promo video. They're both free videos. You can check them out. Take a look at that. Also, be sure and take a look at Michael's website, whitneyguitars.com. And he also runs a luthiery school up there in Canada. So check out the resources that he makes available there. And Michael, thank you so much for coming on. I know you've got a student showing up here in a few minutes, but if you want to hang around for a few minutes in case there's any questions, I'll bring you back on. But if you have to go, I understand.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robbie.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. All right. Now, we haven't introduced Cesar and Manuela down there in Brazil yet. I always do that. So Cesar, Manuela, you can unmute your mic. Let me just bring them up. There they are. Cesar, Manuela in Quito, Brazil. They just got done with Carnival in Brazil. Also, Cesar and Manuela made a trip to Italy and to Portugal here recently, just right after the first of the year. How was your trip?
Yeah, it was pretty nice. It was since 1 year anniversary, and since we did announce the wedding here on the live streams, I think it's worth mentioning also that it has been 1 year already.
Congratulations. I think that deserves a round of applause. There we go. So,
thank you,
1 year wedding anniversary to Cesar Manuela. They went and spent it in Portugal and Italy. So fantastic. And here in a few minutes, we're going to have the drawing. And the drawing is going to be 10% off for a purchase at the Elevate Luthiery website. So we'll come
Yes,
back to
there's
Cesar and Manuela here in a little bit, and they will administrate the drawing for us here. If you have any questions, thank you, Cesar and Manuela. If you have any questions throughout the stream here this morning, go ahead and put your question there or your comment in the chat box, and I'll be happy to address that. And maybe Chris from also can address a few questions if you have any questions. All right, so let's bring on our next guest. This is Chris Ensor from Elevate Lutherie. There he is in his shop in Kansas, correct? No, not Kansas. Missouri. Why was I thinking Kansas? Anyway, he is in Missouri there. He has started a company called Elevate Lutherie, and I'm going to get myself off the screen. I'm going to just let Chris stay on and just take it from here. You can talk about your company, your products, yourself, whatever you want to talk about. And I think you have a little demo coming up here about your neck angle jig.
Yeah. So Elevate kind of was born out of, honestly, a little bit of obstinance. I had the binding jig made for myself from a friend of mine, and people started to notice it online and started to ask questions. And a few years later, here we are, and I'm making jigs full time. So the line started with the binding jig and the rolling pin sander, and has grown. I think there's 20 plus jigs now. But one of the interesting ones that people are really gravitating towards is kind of the neck setting system. So I thought we'd go over that this morning.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at it. By the way, in the video with Michael and the Gypsy Jazz course, he uses this jig. So pay attention, folks. You're going to get a quick little demo of how to use it here.
Yeah, so the idea is with this sort of system that you start by setting your geometry on your neck instead of routing that geometry into the neck or the body. So the jig works on just a standard neck blank. It attaches to a belt sander. I don't have a sander on my bench, but I figured a belt would suffice. But the idea is you can adjust your angle left and right and forward and backwards with this knob. And so then as you are sanding, it can handle just about any standard neck angle that you want by pushing the neck left and right, forward and backwards. And once you get that set, then the routing jig actually conforms to that geometry. Let me undo this from the bench here for a second. So this is the jig in general. It has a pivot point. So if we loosen these screws, which unfortunately I don't have a wrench with me right now. Oh wait, here it is. Sorry, apparently using this standing up is a little bit more awkward than I'm used to.
You used to working sitting down, Chris?
Yeah, I am. So this jig conforms to whatever your neck angle is. That's the beauty of it. Let's see if I can get it close enough. You can see there is a centering hole here, and the jig comes with a conical centering pin. So it'll center naturally on any truss rod slot up to just about under half an inch. If you use a 1/4 inch slot, I also sell a 1/4 inch specific pin, and so that's an option as well. But once the jig is centered on the neck, then you rotate it down, lock these screws in place, and it's ready to route. Another way you can double check your center line is this edge, which is marked center line, is actually the center of the jig as well.
Now, do you start by cutting the tenon or cutting the mortise, or does it matter?
It actually doesn't matter. I think just out of habit, I tend to start on the neck and then move to the body. You're using just a standard router bit with a bearing on the top of the shaft, so it really doesn't matter. You know, once you have your measurements, you know how deep you want to route. I typically, on my neck blank, will mark wherever my connection fret is, be that 14 or 12 or whichever fret you're going to connect with, set my bit to that and route to that depth. And then once you've routed here, the jig has the geometry for the body as well. So this angle plate, just bring it closer to the camera,
Right.
can move positions. And so once the angle plate's moved, then you're using this part of the jig to route in the body.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. This jig that you have in your hand is just for routing the mortise and tenon cavities. For setting the neck angle, you do that beforehand just by placing a straight edge across your neck and butting it up against the body and cutting it on a chop saw or table saw or whatever, correct?
So, well, you can do it that way. You can also use the neck angle jig that I showed a minute ago, where you can sand it in. I would say the vast majority of users don't do it that way. They either do it on a chop saw or a table saw or by hand or however they want to. So it's not a necessity to have both jigs, but they do work hand in hand.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So I like the aspect of the compactness of that. You can just put it in a drawer. You can also, it does both the mortise and the tenon. Just flip it around. Once you establish your neck angle, just flip it around and you're good to go, huh?
Yeah, so now I've just moved it over. I'll just toss one screw in for sake of quickness here. But now that it's on this side, it conforms to a body, which I have here. And the same sort of thing. It'll conform to whatever angle is already here, so there's no measuring of the angle or anything like that. It already conforms to it. One thing that I typically do is just a point of ease is I'll take my center line, draw it on my body, and then I'll place a piece of tape across the sound hole. And then I can align that center line that the tape is made with the center line edge. And that's an easy way to get the jig aligned properly. I also have this thing that came out last year called the alignment checker. And it slides into the mortise. Let me see if I can get this closer to the camera. And there's a little tongue hanging down that you can double check that it's aligned as well.
Nice, nice. Now, when you cut the actual mortise or cut the actual tenon, are you using a router bit with a bearing on it, like a pattern cutting bit, or are you using a guide bushing in your router?
Yeah, so it's just a bearing driven bit. So, let's see if I can get it in frame
There
here.
you go.
So
bearing on
bit.
top then, right?
Yeah. And this is actually a question I get quite a bit. You can actually, I cut it at full depth in one pass. And you can do that by taking small little bites and kind of spiraling your way in instead of just tracing the shape.
Right.
If you want to trace the shape, you can also use a smaller, like half-inch or shoulder length bit and just take multiple passes.
How about a plunge router? Could you use a plunge router as well?
Yep,
So
whatever is the most comfortable. As long as the bearing has contact with the template, then you can use whichever method is your preferred method.
Gotcha. Wow, and that's very well designed. I mean, you stayed up overnight to think that one up, huh?
I've lost a little bit of sleep over the years trying to get them as versatile as possible.
Yeah, I bet. Now, there's a comment here. Somebody has, let's see, this is from John. He says, I love my rolling pin sander, but I've been eyeing up these jigs. So talk a little bit about your rolling pin sander. I've heard a lot about that. That's one of your jigs that I do not have in my shop, but I've heard a lot about it, heard a lot of good positive stuff. So talk about the rolling pin sander.
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple right here. Let me grab some.
And if you folks are watching here, if you have any questions for Chris about any of the jigs, how to use them or anything, just go ahead and put it in the chat box there and I'll put it on screen here.
So there's two different versions of the rolling pin sander. Functionally, they're the same. They're flat across their width. They're great for prepping sides. You can even use them for carving necks. I use them to roughen my heel shapes every time I do a neck. It's really down to the drums. So you've got one that is an aluminum drum, and the other one is an expandable drum. So with the aluminum, you're putting PSA paper on, and with the expandable, you're using sleeves. But again, functionally, they're the exact same. So then you chuck it in a drill, and it's just about the fastest way that you can flatten your sides and prep for binding. I think there was an African Blackwood guitar that I did that I sanded the entire 20 minutes. So it's a great way to save your shoulders, save a little bit of time, and kind of get through a tedious task really quickly.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. I'm just saying I have a little bit of buffering coming in from your end. I wondered if your hotspot's still active.
Let me step aside in a second and check it.
Perfect. All right. While he is checking on that, I'm going to show you one of the Elevate lutherie jigs, one of my favorites, and I have two of them here in my shop. That is the binding cutting jig. I absolutely love this jig, and there are a couple of things that really are fantastic about this jig. One is the cutter head. The cutter head is about a $25 or $30 cutter head, as opposed to the $150 ones with the bearings on it. So there's no bearings. Also the setup on it. I absolutely love the setup. You just take a piece of your binding, dial it in there, close it up, and it's exactly the same offset here as it is with the setup. And so you're immediately ready to go. No guesswork about that. So I'll let Chris talk more about that. There you go. You're back. I was just showing them the binding cutting jig. Have you got one there on your bench you can talk about?
Ironically, I'm assembling a batch of them today, so I do.
There you go. I was telling them there's a couple of things I like about that. One is the cutter head. It's 25 to 30 bucks instead of 150 bucks. That's slick. The other thing I really like about it is the setup. Talk a little bit about how you set up your binding depth and width and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the jig works off of essentially like a flush cut idea. This bar is called the 0 bar. And when these two parts are touching, after you've got the whole jig set up, it's going to give you a flush cut.
Right. Okay.
So
and you just put a piece of your binding or purfling in there. Go ahead. You just put a piece of your binding or purfling in there and then snug it up and you're automatically set up, right?
Yeah, so you can pull this back with the adjustment knob, and however far you pull it back is how far you set your cut. So when you put your binding or purfling in between it, you snug it up to it. It doesn't matter if it's 73 thousandths or 68 thousandths or whatever it might be. You don't need a perfect size bearing because the jig is offset to that exact material.
Perfect. Yeah, I have two of those in my shop and absolutely love them. And it's a little different than your standard binding cutting jigs. Your binding cutting jigs out there on the market, either the guitar is stationary and the router comes around, or the router is stationary and the guitar spins. This one clamps in your vise and you're doing it vertically rather than horizontally. So it's a little different aspect, but it works fantastic. Here's a comment. Let me get Chris back up here. Here's a comment from Ian, and I believe Ian's up there in Canada. Boy, Canada is well represented today. I sprung for one of those mortise and tenon jigs for my last build, and I have to say it's absolutely beautifully built. It's very precise and wonderful to use. Bo Hannum has a great video on its use. Recommended. That's right. I forgot about that video by Bo. Also, you have videos on your website as well, right, Chris?
Yeah, so every product has its own specific tutorial that will tell you if you need any sort of setup or anything like that, then it will walk you through the basic use of the tool. And even in some of them, like the binding jig, have some good tips on how to use it, like to trim your plates after they're glued on so that you can actually sand your sides quicker. So there's some nice little nuggets hidden in there as well. And then I've also collaborated with some different luthiers over the years to kind of show how other people outside of my shop also use it in their shops.
Perfect. And I'm showing the Elevate website right now for you guys that are interested. ElevateLutherie.com is the website. go out there and you can see all the jigs and templates and stuff that Chris makes. How do you come up with ideas for your jigs and templates? Is it feedback from luthiers, or you just have an epitome in the middle of the night? I mean, how's this work?
It's a little bit of both. Whenever I started, it was just kind of whatever I wanted for my own shop. Over the years, I've had people reach out and they're like, "Hey, here's a task I'm struggling with, or something repetitive I'm sick of. Is there a way that you can come up with something to make it better?" In general, especially as I started doing more and more metalworking, I noticed in metalworking you have the idea of indexing and repeatability and precision that isn't built in as much to a lot of woodworking tools. So that's something that I try to make come through in all of the tools that I make whenever I can. Like the variable M&T drilling jig has indexable drill guides. So you're not having to measure, it just pops right into place in the exact spot every time. And you're not having to go through and get out your calipers and work to the thousandths. These jigs are all made, all of the precise high tolerance measurements are all within about 1,000th of an inch. So I've essentially done the hard measuring for you, and as long as you get it in the right place, then it's just right on every time.
Right. Somebody else had a question here about the mortise and tenon jig, and I'm trying to find it again. I can't find it here. Something about, will it lay flat for easy storage? Oh, there it is. That was from TJ down in North Carolina. Yeah, will the jig lay flat for easier storage?
Yeah, so all you have to do is take the angle plate off, which is 2 screws, and then it'll lay flat. I have almost my entire catalog of tools that I personally use in a single drawer in a file cabinet.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Here's a question from Bruce. Will the mortise and tenon jig, is there a reason, or with the mortise and tenon jig, is there a reason for not having the angle plate longer and with 2 centering pin holes?
Sure. So whenever I was developing it, it was kind of a balance between cost and necessity as far as the length. I didn't see much need to have it much longer than that because you have plenty of space. It's about 6 inches long to actually be able to clamp onto the neck as well as the body. I've actually, if you watch Bohannon's video, I made him a custom angle plate that has 2 holes in it. I've not brought that to market as a standard option because it actually can throw things off if your setup isn't perfect. Let me see if I can actually demonstrate that. Of course, I have it on the wrong setting now, but with it conforming to the geometry that's already there, if this center line or this angle is perfectly square to your truss rod, then 2 holes will align perfectly. But if you're off just a little bit, if that, let's say it's 1 degree off, what's going to happen is the jig is going to do this. And so 2 holes can be beneficial, but if your geometry is right, a single hole, because it's referencing a flat surface and then centering off that pin, is going to give you the same result. So it's kind of a tricky spot in that I don't want people having more issues because of that second hole. If you know what you're doing, it can be great. If you're newer to building and lutherie, then it can actually cause you problems.
Okay. Here's a question from Steve, and I've had this issue myself, but I know how to get around it. Steve says, I recently purchased the binding jig, and now I'm getting close to actually using it. Seems a little trickier for Spanish cedar or Spanish guitar with the neck already installed. Any technique or tips for guitars with the neck? Makes it a little harder to spin that thing around, doesn't it, Chris?
Sure, and I actually don't build in that style, so Robbie, I'd be interested to see what your experience is with it.
Okay.
The advice that I give to people whenever they ask about it is that you just have to be careful to stop short so you don't nick the neck with the router bit and then finish it by hand. Yeah,
and that's exactly what I do. You have that neck swinging around there, and it's the same. Let me get myself back on screen here. It would be the same if you're using, the LMI or the StuMac or any other type of router or binding jig on the market there. You always have to stop short of your neck. Because if you run into that neck, I mean, that's not the big deal, but if you run into the neck enough that you're inside your footprint of your fretboard, then that's a problem. But whether you're spinning the guitar horizontally or vertically, it doesn't matter. The neck's the same. So it's no big deal. Don't overthink it. You'll be fine. All right, Chris, there's another jig that you make that is just like the bee's knees for everybody, and that's that side dot thing you have there. Explain a little bit about that one.
Yeah, this was one of my early jigs that I think I had done a guitar show in Memphis. And I was walking around this room full of beautiful guitars, and like any other luthier, I was comparing my guitars to, the other veterans of the world that are amazing builders. And I noticed that my side dots weren't really straight in line. They were kind of up and down, just enough to bother me. And I had a drill press. I was using jigs and stuff to hold it in place, and the drill bit grabs a grain line, and that tiny little 2mm 3/32 drill bit drifts just enough that it can be a problem. And so this is the Dot Doctor. It's a simple little aluminum jig with a drill bushing in it. The top of it has a center line, and just a couple years ago I added a scale. That was one of the most requested alterations to this jig from any jig that I've ever had. And so what you do is you take your fingerboard. I've already marked, let's see if you can even see them, but there's tiny little yellow lines on there where I've marked where the center of each of the dots is that I want to drill. In this instance, because it's not bound and you have your fret slots, you can actually use that scale to center it by eyeball if you want.
Oh, that's slick. I like that.
Instead of actually measuring. So then the jig is designed to put the dot too high straight out of the gate. And that way you can actually put a shim on the jig and get it placed where you want it, instead of it being only one thickness, assuming that everyone uses the same thickness of fingerboard.
Right.
So in this case, I've already got my shims double stuck tape on it to here, and I will align the jig where I want it. You can't really see the yellow line, but then you would clamp it down and simply drill. And the other fun thing you can do, it's actually set the depth of the inlay that you want by just calculating how much of a stick out that you want on your drill bit.
Nice. Now, if you wanted to use different diameter fret markers or side markers, does the jig accommodate that, or is it one size fits all?
It's one size per jig. The two sizes that I stock standard are 2mm and 3/32. I also offer custom CNC services, so if anybody needs a custom size, I've done that quite a bit for people.
Nice. Nice. Okay. All right. Here's one quick question. This is going back to the binding jig. So this is from Ken right here in Colorado. The binding jig. I was wondering if it's difficult to balance the guitar vertically as you guide it through the cutter. You want to comment on that, please, Chris?
Sure. So I will say, of any style of binding jig, this one takes a little bit more motor skills than just putting it in a cradle. The best thing that you can do is to use the jig as much as possible. So that's why in the tutorial I actually suggest people trimming their plates a little bit under the sides with the jig, because it's giving you the mechanics of moving the body around. It's one of those kind of fear factors that people have, but once you've done it a couple times, it's really not that big of a deal. I used it on my very first guitar, this style of jig at least, on my very first guitar when I was learning from Master Luthier Sergei DeJong in Canada, and I've used it ever since. It's really just a matter of people getting it past their fear of, I don't know, because I've never done it this way. What I will tell you is there are 3 points of contact. So 1, 2, and then the donut is number 3. As long as the jig is touching this point of contact, you can't overcut. So what I do is I sit low in a chair, like in a stool, and I just focus on this point. From there, you'll notice in the videos, because I'm comfortable with it, I do a pass all the way around. In one direction, I actually do 2 passes in one direction, then one in the opposite direction. But you don't have to do it that way. That can be intimidating for new users. So you can move it as far as you're comfortable, then pull it back off of the jig, reposition your hands, and restart the cut. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing sort of one pass.
Right. I've found that if you make a mistake, let's say you're not at both points of contact, you usually just cutting shallow. It's not going to cut deeper on you, so it's really no problem. Just make multiple passes and you got it.
Yeah, for me, for whatever reason, 3 cuts is usually all I need, which is a very fast way to go around it. But what I also tell people is just keep cutting until you don't hear it anymore.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, we're starting to get to the end of our time here because Cesar and Manuela down there in Brazil have an appointment. So I'm going to pop down to them real quick, and we're going to do a quick drawing, and then we'll come back, say goodbye to Chris. And I think Michael's still up there in Canada. Let's just go down to Brazil here real quick. Cesar and Manuela, are we ready for the drawing?
Yes, we are. We have almost 60 participants, 59 participants.
Nice. All right. Let's see what we got. Roger.
43. Yes.
Look at that. All right. So, Cesar, you're going to contact Roger with the special promo code that Chris has created. You get 10% off one of the jigs, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Cesar Manuela. I know you have to go, so if you want to go ahead and leave the chat or this live stream, that's fine. Everybody will understand. And have a nice day, and I'll be in touch with you later, maybe today or tomorrow.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you to Cesar Manuela. Also, thank you to Roger. Congratulations. Look at that, huh? All right. Thank you so much. All right. Let's get back to Michael real quick. Michael, you're still up there in Summerland, Canada. There he is. I guess it's summer all year round there because you're in Summerland, right?
We'd like to think so, yeah.
Now, the brand new Gypsy Jazz course available at the Lutherie Academy is 10% off as a launching for the next 2 weeks. After that, it goes back to the regular price. You can go ahead and go over to the Lutherie Academy website. You can go ahead and get it at the discounted price. It's over 26 hours of high-quality instruction by Master Luthier up there in Canada, Michael Whitney. So you got about 2 weeks, and then that price is going to go away. It's going to go back to the regular price, which is about 10% more. So thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the stream here with us, and thank you for sharing your knowledge in this Gypsy Jazz course. I know it took us a long time to do it, 2 years in the making, but congratulations on being able to put that out.
Excellent, Robbie. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. I know you got a student, so if you want to go ahead and take off too, I understand. Thank you so much for coming by.
Perfect. All right. Take care.
Yep. All right. And here's Chris at Ensor at Elevate Lutherie. Any final questions for Chris? Speak now or forever hold your peace. I don't see any more over here. I don't see any more in the chat box. If you have one, now's the time. If not, I'll go ahead and say thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Chris, for coming in. I appreciate you being on here today and spending some of your morning with us and talking about your jigs and your company. I certainly appreciate it. And everybody go check out. You betcha. Everybody go check out Elevate Lutherie website. He's got some fantastic jigs, all high quality stuff, machined aluminum. I mean, this stuff is built to last. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Over and out. And I'll go ahead and end the stream here. Happy building, folks.